Hello, my name is Ariana Vasquez, and my topic is physician-assisted suicide. Physician-assisted suicide is defined to be suicide by a patient facilitated by means or by information provided by a physician who is aware of a patient's intent by counseling about lethal doses of drugs, prescribing lethal doses, and or supplying the drugs. Legal status of PAS has been discussed since the mid-1900s throughout different states. Since then, it has been approved in the states of Oregon, Washington, Vermont, Montana, and California, all, however, under very specific circumstances. Laws for eligibility state that a patient must be competent of their request. They must be a legal resident of that state. They must be over 18 years of age. Their illness must be considered terminal, with a life expectancy of 6 months or less. Their terminal illness must be confirmed by 2 independent physicians. 2 oral requests must be made by the patient within a 15-day waiting period. Written requests must also be submitted, and it must be witnessed. Prescriptions written no less than 48 hours after the written request, and the patient must be able to self-administer medication. The ethical dilemma for health educators is whether they should be supported of PAS or not. It is debated whether PAS abides by a health educator's responsibility to promote health as mandated in Article 4 of the Code of Ethics for Health Educators by empowering individuals to adopt healthy lifestyles, or does it comply to the responsibility to the patient as Article 1 of the same Code of Ethics mandates by supporting the right of individuals to make informed decisions about their health, encourage actions that support the best balance of benefits over harm, and protect the dignity of individuals. One side argues that PAS counters the traditional duty of a health educator to promote life and do no harm, as the termination of life would be resulted. They also argue it is a form of abuse, as the practice of this assisted suicide may become common or a habit for some health care professionals and might eventually cause them to pressure other patients to choose this sort of treatment. They also argue that it violates the sanctity of life. Religious and secular traditions have always upheld the sanctity of life and have seen suicide as an abuse of the gift of life. Therefore, they believe that a health educator who supports PAS is unethical because their duty is to promote wellness. The other side argues that PAS is ethical because they believe that it is a respect of autonomy. They state that terminally ill patients who request suicide have the capacity to make a rational decision about the time and the manner of their death. They also argue that it is a form of justice by being able to give all patients an equal opportunity, by arguing that patients who are on life support are many times considered for induced death, and why not be able to give that same option to patients who are fully aware and competent to make that decision on their own. They argue that it is a form of compassion by being able to help patients escape unbearable suffering, not only physically but mentally and emotionally as well, since they no longer have control of their self-being. They argue it is an individual liberty, and so therefore prohibiting patients to be able to be assisted with suicide limits their liberty. And lastly, they believe it is a professional responsibility for the health educator not only to assist them, but to end their suffering, because that means that it is a form of wellness. They are no longer under excruciating pain. So how do we as health educators decide whether PAS is ethical or unethical? Nash has developed 3 moral languages to help analyze moral issues, which are the language of background beliefs, the language of moral character, and the language of moral principle. The first moral language helps the health educator understand what his personal beliefs are towards a topic. This moral language is said to be the most basic element of ethics, as it allows you to explain and justify your moral values based on religious or emotional beliefs. Using this language as a health educator, one is able to identify what he or she believes in regards to PAS and whether it coincides with their religious background and what emotions it generates. The second moral language refers to characteristics that distinguish one person from another based on the practice of certain behaviors, such as the practice of some and the avoidance of others, intentions, thoughts, actions, disposition, intuition, and feelings. However, these characters that are identified with this language reflect the community that provided them with a framework for thinking about what is right and what is wrong. With this moral language, a health educator must analyze who they consider to be as a professional and what actions represent that. The third moral language justifies an ethical decision based on a logical appeal to appropriate rules, principles, and theories. These logical appeals are identified by a moral brief, which asks questions in order to construct a sound defense for taking a particular ethical action, and a justification schema that prepares a step-by-step principled defense for the decision made. With this language, a health educator must consider what principles are involved when delegating the ethical behavior of PAS, which in this case are fidelity, meaning the duty to be faithful to the care of others, non-maleficence, duty not to harm, injure, or impose risks without compelling justification, beneficence, obligation to maximize benefits and minimize harm, and autonomy, the respect for independence, internal self-rule, and self-determination. So how should this issue be resolved? My proposition is that health educators should not be supportive of PAS. Based on my professional responsibility to promote and develop health as a health educator, intentionally ending the life of another does not hold up to that. My personal beliefs also conflict towards this topic, as death is something I consider should not be determined by man. And my professional community has always advocated life. Lastly, 3 of the 4 principles involved in this topic support the ethical argument that health educators should not support PAS, because we have a duty to care for patients, not to harm or injure them, and maximize benefits and minimize harm. Thank you.